The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
He did make a number of false and misleading statements. He did not declare a national emergency. The question now is whether he changed any minds that would help build his wall on the southern border or reopen the parts of the government that are closed.
This is a humanitarian crisis, a crisis of the heart and a crisis of the soul.
President Trump appealing to the nation to support his long-promised border wall, painting a dark picture of undocumented immigrants and accusing Democrats of leaving the country vulnerable.
How much more American blood must we shed before Congress does its job?
Democratic leadership firing back, accusing the president of fear-mongering and urging him to end the shutdown that has left 800,000 Americans unsure of when they'll receive their next paycheck.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis, stoke fear, and divert attention from the turmoil in his administration.
Both sides appearing no closer to compromise, with President Trump falsely claiming Democrats wanted a steel wall.
At the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall.
And insisting that Democrats do not support border security, even though the House voted in favor of $1.3 billion for border security and technology last week. The president also making this false claim about funding for the wall.
The wall will also be paid for indirectly by the great new trade deal we have made with Mexico.
But the new deal has not been ratified, and there's no guarantee it would generate revenue or that Congress would earmark it for the wall. Right. President Trump backing up his dire warnings with grisly stories of crimes blamed on undocumented immigrants.
Over the years, thousands of Americans have been brutally killed by those who illegally entered our country.
But Border Patrol statistics show that illegal southern border arrests are near the lowest point in almost 20 years. And multiple studies have found that as immigration has gone up, crime has gone down. One Texas study found that undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than U.S. citizens. The president also pointing to the opioid epidemic as part of his pitch.
Every week, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods across from our southern border.
While these statistics are true, the majority of heroin that comes across the border is smuggled through legal points of entry, meaning that a border wall would likely do little to help. Democrats quick to pounce on the administration's credibility issues.
Sadly, much of what we heard from President Trump throughout this senseless shutdown has been full of misinformation and even malice. The president has chosen fear.
The president's speech comes amid signs that patience for the shutdown among GOP senators is wearing thin, with multiple Republican lawmakers now signaling that they favor reopening the government as border negotiations continue.
These are people who work hard, and they deserve to know that they're going to be paid.
Conservatism is a racket.
It is such a racket. It is unbelievable. And you know what? They did a great job last night. The New York Times did it in real time. Everybody, all the networks, they did real fact checking in real time, really fast. And I got to tell you, it's not so much fact checking anymore. It's just about trying to predict which lies Trump is going to haul out again. Right? I mean, it's like at this point, you just make note of which lies he, used again. Because it's all been fact-checked. It's all been previously debunked. Everybody understands immigrant communities are less likely to have violent crime in them. Native-born Americans are 85% more likely to commit violent crime. If this president was really interested in each, life and how precious it all is, he would be, touting that the Democrats yesterday did a background check bill to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally deranged, to keep guns out of the hands of people who are prohibited from having them because they're felons, but this is such bullcrap. I mean, the whole thing, all he did last night was play the networks. I mean, I said yesterday, he's too chicken shit to declare a national emergency, and also he's too lazy. He's just too lazy. He doesn't want to have to deal with being actually in charge of any damn thing. He just wants to sit there and complain. It's who he is. It's what he does. See, he even told a bunch of TV anchors, as reported by the New York Times' Maggie Haberman, there was ahead of this, whatever this was. I mean, you could almost hear Bill Shine and Sarah Sanders and Kellyanne Conway saying, "Oh, next time more Adderall." I mean, he sniffed and snorted and huffed and puffed his way through it, but apparently it wasn't enough for him to manufacture genuine, passion about anything he was supposedly advocating for. He can't read. They forced him to read off a teleprompter. That wasn't the right amount of drugs for him. It was very unenthusiastic. I swear to God, he wasn't into it. He's just not that into any of it anymore. He's not that into a wall. He's not that into concrete. He's not that into steel. He's not that into a barrier. He's just not. And he actually told reporters and TV anchors who were there in the Oval Office prior to going live that he didn't even want to make the speech or go to the border. And today he was supposed to go to the border. Remember? He was poor Donald. Now he doesn't even enjoy lying anymore. I mean, the one thing that he thought he was good at, and he's not, terrible liar. And I mean that in every sense of the word. He's just terrible at it. He's a terrible liar because he gets caught all the time in his lies. And he's a terrible liar because he doesn't even enjoy it anymore. There's no there. There's no enthusiasm. There's no verve. So he told a group of TV anchors he didn't even want to make the speech. He didn't want to go to the border. He said, quote, "It's not going to change a damn thing, but I'm still doing it." The only thing more offensive, if that's possible, having a foreign agent as the president of the United States of America and breaking the United States of America from within with the powers of the presidency is having somebody who's just going through the motions and not even enjoying it while he's doing it. And this is where we are. He is losing. He is losing, and that is why he's not having any fun anymore. He lied so hard last night. Let me tell you, I looked at every fact check. There's a bunch. I put a bunch of them in the homework today. If you go to RandiRhodes.com and click on the homework, it's there. It's free. You could sign up for it, and I'll send it to you in the morning every single day so you can have it. But I put a bunch of them in there, and I'm telling you, the most thorough fact check was 10 pages for a 9-minute speech. 10 freaking pages. One of the lies he told is that at the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall. That's because to this Chester the molester, no doesn't mean no. It means I'll change a detail or two and then you'll say yes. The Democrats did not ask for steel over concrete. The Democrats said no wall. It's poison. It's anathema. They said that the symbol of the United States has to be the Statue of Liberty and not a 30-foot wall of any kind. But he just sat there and lied last night. And of course, it was loaded with the usual brown boogeymen. He had more stories of murder and mayhem than Hispanic novellas all combined. I love those. That's how I learned Spanish. No, really, he had so many stories of brown murder and mayhem that, you would think that NBC needs to pull Lock Up Raw and start running, Hispanic murder and mayhem series, It's so ridiculous. So ridiculous. And Donald, nobody is bringing tons of heroin into this country by schlepping them across the desert in their calves or in their backpacks or in their panties. That is not how it gets here. Nobody does that. It's coming through tractor trailers, either mixed with legitimate commerce, like avocados or whatever, sugar, or in hollowed out parts of tractor trailers and automobiles. And what we really need is more of the equipment that we already have and that we already deploy at the legal port of entry, the commerce points, that can scan a tractor trailer or an automobile or a van or a minivan to see if the body of the car or the frame of the car or any parts of the car have been hollowed out or otherwise reworked in order to create room for tons of heroin. His medieval solution is not going to solve our 21st century problem. I mean, it was so bad. And you know what? I hate being right all the time, but I got to tell you, I freaking was. All right, so what did he do today before we get into the reason why he's carrying on like this? Because remember, there is no crisis at the border. You could, go through all the fact checks. Again, I gave them to you today so you could have the best ones. All right? But obviously, immigration peaked in 2000. We had 1.6 million people trying to get across the border. And we had a little bit of a, it came down, and then we had a little bit of a spike in 2007. It is very low now. It is the lowest it has been in 20 years. So there's that. Meaning, it ain't a crisis, which is why he couldn't declare a national emergency. I told you yesterday, I'm sure his White House counsel, I'm sure even his acting freaky attorney general, who, by the way, is not going to be the attorney general. We're going to have confirmation hearings on the 15th for this Bill Barr dude. And if Bill Barr is confirmed, Rod Rosenstein is quitting. But that's an interesting topic to discuss, because I got a funny feeling Rod, who supervises Mueller, knows exactly when it's cool to go. And so he's talking like February. All right. And so I got a funny feeling we're going to have a Mueller report by February. That said, there is no emergency at the border. And we know that because for 2 years, the president of the United States had a Republican House and a Republican Senate, and nobody there felt shaken by the emergency at the border to the point where they said, let's just give him his money for his wall. We need a wall. That'll solve our emergency. In fact, for 2 years, we didn't hear very much about border security. We didn't hear anything about his stupid wall. It wasn't until he started, into the midterm elections that he started, focusing on a caravan of 4,000 people. Now, we're talking about immigration, people trying to get into this country in the year 2000. 1.6 million people turned away. 1.6 million. We're nowhere even close to that. Like, not even a quarter of that. Okay, so we have no emergency, and I'm sure that the legal geniuses over there were explaining that to him. That, yeah, you could declare emergency, but in order to appropriate money yourself, you're going to have to prove to a court that you were reacting to a real emergency. And that you don't have. You don't have the evidence. You don't have the numbers. You don't have a crisis at the border. You have nothing. And they're just going to, show your behavior over the last 2 years as proof. Even if you doctor the numbers, which you can't do because, frankly, your State Department isn't down with it. Department of Homeland Security under Kelly released numbers. They said that all the drugs were coming through legal ports of entry and that they weren't being brought in by, individuals and all that. You're kind of doomed here. And that's why it was easy for me to call it yesterday and tell you he was going to make zero news. And he didn't.
Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
He talked about drug crossings over the border, but government statistics show much of the heroin actually comes not over the unguarded border, but through ports of call. He talked about undocumented crossings over the past months. In fact, the number of undocumented crossings over the southern border has been steadily down over the last 10 years, and the government reports that there is more outward traffic than inward traffic.
As for the trade deal he mentioned with Mexico, which he said would pay for the wall, that trade deal is not yet complete. And the president said that law enforcement professionals have requested the $5.7 billion. It's he who requested it, and it's he who said he would own the shutdown.
Absolutely correct, sir.
And so we are in, day 19 or something like that? I mean, Friday is the day. I told you, January 11th is the day that the federal workers are expecting a paycheck. And if this president continues on this course of screw you, I want what I want, and, governing through temper tantrum, then the workers who are working without pay and the workers who are furloughed are going to miss a paycheck. And that means the next opportunity for a paycheck would be the end of January. And they haven't gotten paid since December, I believe, 28th. So they will have a whole month of no money. You're talking 800,000 federal workers, but you're also talking about, hundreds of thousands of contractors who will not receive back pay. It will not be legislated to give them back pay. They are not covered the way that the federal workers are covered. So he is creating an economic crisis in this country for hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million American citizens, because he wants a 14th century or 3rd century, depends on, what your reading of history is and which walls you're looking at. He wants a medieval solution to a 21st century problem, and he doesn't even believe in it himself. So what did he do today? Today he was supposed to go to Texas. Today he was supposed to go down to the border, but he didn't want to go down to the border. He told everybody, I don't want to do it. I'm not in the mood to go down to the border. It's pointless. There's nothing there. Only Bill Shine and Sarah Sanders and Kellyanne Conway think that I should do this, but I don't really want to do it because he's lazy, is what it is. So what did he do today? All right, so this morning, late morning, he had reporters in the Oval Office, and he gave a little dog and pony show there. Then he went a couple of blocks to the Senate to find out if the Senate still supports him in his stupid, brutal, cruel shutdown. I mean, you're not even talking about people who don't work for the government and how they're going to pay. You don't even talk about, nobody is talking about the people who receive food stamps. That's millions and millions of households, like 40 plus million households, okay? Nobody's talking about the ag subsidies, the ag, emergency payments, okay? They're not subsidies this time, they're emergency payments, because he screwed up the soybean orders for our farmers with his stupid Chinese trade machinations, okay? And so the ag bill had to go through Congress really, really stinking fast to get those payments out, and those payments haven't gone out because the government is shut down. You're not talking about 73 million households who are, beginning January 28th, starting to file their taxes, who count on that return in order to pay bills, in order to buy things, like a water heater or something expensive that they've put off until they get their tax return, right? So all that is, in question, because only 1 in 8 IRS employees are actually working. 1 in 8. So I know he said, we're going to allow them to go ahead and process tax refunds. However, there are no people there to process 73 million tax refunds. And by the way, the 1 in 8 at the IRS, but like 15% of the personnel at the IRS are actually working. Most of those are IT people. You can't call the IRS and get a question answered right now because there's no one there to answer your call. Anyway, so today he goes up to, first he has the reporters, and then he goes to Capitol Hill. And he goes over to the Senate, and he tweeted or gave a statement. I don't know. I just saw it on the Chiron as I was prepping the show. He said, the whole Senate, all the Republicans in the Senate are unified around my border wall. But you know what the truth is? Because after he did that, and after the news started reporting, he said that all the Republican senators are unified around his border wall. Lindsey Graham came out, and he gave a little interview. And some of the reporters said, well, we heard Lisa Murkowski is not down with this. And he said, yeah, well, Lisa Murkowski, But also, Susan Collins of Maine is not down with it. Cory Gardner of Colorado is not down with it. What's her name? Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia is not down with it. And Susan Collins, did I say Susan Collins of Maine? So 5 Republican senators are wanting to open the government right freaking now. And that leaves him with 48 votes. You see what I mean? He's just such a freaking lunatic. And he is literally crashing the United States. He's literally breaking it. And it seems like he broke it for the farmers. He broke it for the working guys now. He's broken it for, people who get tax refunds. This is the middle class. He is literally breaking the entire middle class. Well, why would you do that? Because in an oligarchy, the middle class is the one... It's the one sector that puts up the biggest stinking fight. So if you hobble the middle class, if you make the middle class hurt so hard that all they're going to think about is going to the food pantry for the first time in their lives and how to explain this to their children, or not pay a car payment and lose their car because the repo man shows up while they're at the food pantry parked and takes their car away because they haven't been able to make the car payment, they're not going to worry about anything except their own little world, to the point where they'll be angry, but they won't know one thing to do about it. So in this way, I think Donald Trump did change a lot of minds, no matter what the media said last night. Oh, no minds were changed. No, I think he changed plenty of minds. I think that the people who thought he was a harmless idiot now realize he is a dangerous idiot. The people who just thought he was an amoral guy now understand he's a dangerous amoral guy. And the reason that all of a sudden this became an issue, the only reason why it's become, the thing about the wall again, they'll say, oh, it's because Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter and Sean Hannity. No, the reason why they brought it up in the first place, the reason why they said if Donald Trump doesn't do this, it's the end of his presidency, is because the end of his presidency is staring him in the face. Mueller has... Oh, the pressure of a word. What does he have? The pressure of a word. What word would you use to describe Paul Manafort sharing internal polling data with Russian intelligence agents while the Russians were hacking the DNC? What word would you use to describe? Oh, right. Collusion. Well, see, that's the word, collusion. But what I really want to say is conspiracy to commit fraud against the United States. That's what Mueller has. Because idiot boy Manafort's attorneys yesterday tried to put out an answer to Mueller's charges that Paul Manafort lied to Mueller while cooperating, and that Paul Manafort engaged in witness tampering through his Russian intel partner, Konstantin Kilimnik, thereby destroying his sentencing, easing of his sentencing, right? So his lawyers responded to Mueller's charges in writing, which was required by them to protect their clients' lesser sentence, his claim for a lesser sentence because he cooperated, right? And that was on. He was cooperating. And then all of a sudden, Mueller withdrew the agreement. Why did Mueller withdraw the agreement? He said that even when he was, he had entered into a agreement with Mueller to get a lesser sentence, he was still lying to Mueller, and he was, lying about various things like witness tampering. And the other thing that we now know that Mueller was alleging that Manafort lied to Mueller about was that Manafort passed to a Russian intelligence agent, Konstantin Kilimnik, internal polling data that was privately gotten by a Republican polling firm. I'm going to guess it was Kellyanne Conway, but I don't know. To a Russian intelligence agent so that the Russians could then pinpoint with incredible accuracy where they needed to deploy their social media strategy on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., in order to suppress Democratic voters and people who could have gone either way. And that's how they knew Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, because they had, the Russian intelligence had internal polling data from the Trump campaign. Now, that is cooperation between a presidential campaign and a foreign adversary's intelligence operatives, agents who we would die, to infiltrate. That is what Manafort apparently lied to Mueller about. And we know this because the idiot's attorneys wrote their response to Mueller. And they tried to redact those paragraphs that described that, yeah, he did it. They're not denying that Manafort did do that. They're not denying that Manafort gave internal polling data to a Russian intelligence agent. They're saying he forgot to tell you about it. He didn't really lie to you about it. He just forgot to tell you that he did that. And the important part isn't whether or not Paul Manafort is suffering from gout to the point where his memory is shredded. The important point here is that it happened, that he did it. And they're not denying that he did it. And that is why Donald Trump has suddenly decided that border security and the stupid wall has to be brought up again, because he needs to feed the maggots. The maggots need some brown flesh, and they need to chew on that brown flesh. That is their lifeblood. That is what they need to continue to support this maniac who is going after the middle class in such an obvious and thorough way. They need to believe that they're going to go broke. They need to believe that their restaurants and their stores and their shops and their main streets are going to be empty in West Virginia or in Jessup, Georgia, or in Louisiana, not because the corrections officers are furloughed, or not because they're working without pay, not because the IRS workers in Ogden, Utah, and the agriculture people aren't working. No, they need to believe that they're going broke for a principle, and that is a wall. That's why this is coming up again. That's why Kellyanne Conway and Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Bill Shine, who used to be the operations guy at Fox News, who sat there through all of Bill O'Reilly's Tiller the baby killer violence and all of his harassment of women and paid all those settlements and everything else. Bill Shine is now the communications guy. Well, he's acting. They're all acting. Nobody will really, really work for this guy. But Bill Shine is the one that's talking them into bringing all this up. And Bill Shine is the go-between between Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter and the White House. And he's telling them, bring up the border wall. Bring it up again. We'll refocus everybody's attention on that because Mueller's almost done. You got Natalia Veselnitskaya yesterday indicted, and now Manafort.
Next, to speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Yeah, I was hoping. I was like, oh, they're going to put us back to work tomorrow. That's what I was hoping to hear. To be honest, I mean, maybe I'm living in a dream world, but it seems even more polarized than I could have imagined.
It's gotten worse.
I think so, yeah.
We all have to make compromises with each other throughout our daily lives, with our boss, our partner. It seems like the government should be a great example of that, and they just don't seem to come together right now.
Do you feel like you're stuck in the middle of this? Do you feel like you're being used?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a pawn in a game that I don't agree with. But yeah, I definitely feel stuck, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it.
I'm pretty resilient, but I do not like being in this position, and I feel almost like I'm being punished for something that I didn't do.
You are. You are. That is what Donald Trump is doing. He's literally breaking the backs of the middle class because it has a cascade effect. The shutdown of the government, it cascades into our wider economy. I mean, you could talk about, those were the furloughed workers. You could talk about, how they're going to manage, because I have no earthly idea how. And then you've got to talk about the contractors, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of them that are affected equally, and they're not covered under back pay that the Congress might vote for. I don't even know if the president will sign it, because, he's the kind of guy that likes to stiff people, especially if he believes that you're not supportive enough of him, right? I will tell you now, Trump tweeted out this morning that he is going to cut off FEMA aid for California for the fires. No FEMA aid. He wrote, this is what he wrote. He wrote, billions of dollars are sent to the state of California for forest fires that with proper forest management would never happen. Unless they get their act together, which is unlikely, I have ordered FEMA to send no more money. Because you don't support him enough, California. If he had his way, everyone in this country right now would be building walls and raking forests. That's what he's like Chairman Mao during the Cultural Revolution, when he wanted everybody to smelt pig iron from their home furnaces. I mean, this is just a sick man. This is a dangerous man, and this is a man who is looking to break this country. Not just our alliances, as we could see with NATO, and they don't pay their fare. Everything with him is transactional. They don't. It's all bullcrap, right? And NAFTA was the problem. NAFTA was what was hurting the middle class. He's going to renegotiate. Meanwhile, that trade deal has not been ratified by the Senate. It hasn't been ratified by Mexico, and it hasn't been ratified by Canada. And I would like to know, if we do collect tariffs on things coming in from Mexico and Canada, how in the world does the President of the United States earmark that money for a wall? He can't, right? And if Walmart gets a break, how in the hell does that pay for a wall? It doesn't. So everything he's saying is a lie, but the only reason why he's bringing up this wall thing again is to distract the entire freaking media away from the fact that this president conspired to defraud the United States during a presidential campaign, during a presidential what do you call that? The convention, where they put in the new plank with regard to selling lethal weapons to Ukraine, with regard to taking sanctions off of Russia, with regard to having Russia involve itself in our electoral business by providing them with specific polling data, internal polls, Manafort. And can I just remind you what my theory was early on? I just want to remind you, and as soon as I say it, you'll go, yeah, I remember you said that. I surmised that Oleg Deripaska, this aluminum magnate in this oligarch in Russia, who contracted with Paul Manafort and sued Paul Manafort for not producing what he contracted Manafort to produce, sued him in the Cayman Islands. Really weird case, right? And I assumed, or concluded, whatever you like, that what Deripaska contracted Manafort to do was to get a friendly Russian cultivated person elected president of the United States, and that had happened years ago, and that Manafort never produced on that media plan that he drew up and gave to Oleg Deripaska, and that Oleg Deripaska began to sue Manafort, and Manafort knew that he was in big trouble. And so Manafort then, through Roger Stone and Tom Barrack and all the friends around Donald Trump, was then brought in to work for free, no less. A guy who had money troubles was brought in to work and agreed to work for free for the Trump campaign. and got hold of all kinds of internal polling data and provided it to Konstantin Kilimnik, who then gave it to Oleg Deripaska. And you remember that Manafort was writing emails. And the reason why I went down this road is because one of the emails he wrote was offering to Oleg Deripaska private briefings about the Trump campaign. Private briefings. And that's what I started to say, oh, so maybe he did make good on this media plan. Well, this accidental release about Manafort's conspiracy to transfer internal Republican polling data to a foreign adversary after and during their hacking. I mean, look, if you hack the DNC and you have all their internal data, and you have all their internal strategy, and you understand what's going on inside the Democratic National Committee, and then to understand what the polling is inside the Republican National Committee, Paul Manafort hands it to you to try and make himself whole with Oleg Deripaska. Then you have everything you would need in order to play bigly in an American election. And of course, the conclusion from the intelligence agencies early on was that the Russians were involved to support and help Donald Trump. Okay, so yesterday we find out that Natalia Veselnitskaya is obviously a Russian agent as well. She's been indicted in the Southern District of New York for lying to the court in the Prevezon case. And just so you can refresh what that Prevezon case was, okay, that was a it's easy for me to explain because I really have my brain wrapped around it. Bill Browder had a hedge fund in Russia. It was called Hermitage Capital. He got a feeling or some information that the Russians were going to steal all of his money, that Putin wanted all of his money. And so him and his lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, decided to sell off so much of their, a ton of their assets before Putin seized Bill Browder's money. And they did. And they made about $1 billion doing it. And they were hit with a tax bill. The tax bill was for $230 million capital gains tax in Russia. He paid it. Bill Browder paid those taxes. And then, once the money was in the Treasury, Putin decided to set up some shell companies, some fake companies that were posing as subsidiaries or attached to Hermitage Capital, and they would file for tax refunds. As soon as the filing was made for their tax refunds, $230 million, the next day, their refunds were paid. The next day. Prevezon was set up in Cyprus to get hold of that $230 million and launder it. And Natalia Veselnitskaya was the lawyer for Prevezon. Prevezon was able to do that, and they laundered the money through New York luxury real estate. That's what happened yesterday. This is what Bill Browder has been trying to tell my audience and anybody that interviews him, and nobody can wrap their brain around it, and I don't know why. It's not that complex. He got wind that they were going to steal his money. He sold his assets. He paid the capital gains tax on that sale, $230 million. It went to the Russian Treasury. The Russian Treasury wanted to take that money out of the Treasury quietly and illicitly, and so they set up shell companies to file refund requests for that $230 million that Bill Browder paid. And they got their money, these shell companies did, and then they had to launder it. And they laundered it through Cyprus, through a company called Prevezon, and bought New York luxury real estate with the $230 million that they took out of the Treasury illicitly. That's what happened. Now, Natalia Veselnitskaya was the lawyer here in the United States because she isn't admitted to practice law in New York. American lawyers helped her get access to the courts. She said to the court that she would get Russian banking information or Treasury information, and she filed briefs in the Prevezon case on behalf of Putin, saying, oh no, Bill Browder stole this money. Bill Browder is the one that stole the money. He paid the capital gains taxes, but then they took it back. Well, she went further, and she said he didn't even pay the $230 million in taxes, and he needs to be rendered to Putin, which is what Putin brought up in Helsinki with Donald Trump standing on the stage, and Donald Trump knows where that money went. So Putin standing next to the president of the United States saying, you know, Bill Browder is a criminal and he's a crook and he's a thief and he made $1 billion, which is true, but he didn't pay any taxes on Russia or in the United States. Why would Bill Browder pay taxes in the United States? He's not a U.S. citizen. He's a subject of the British Crown, okay? So, I mean, these are terrible, terrible liars. And the president of the United States is colluding. He colluded that day in Helsinki. Nobody will explain it to you about how, except for me, because people don't understand the Bill Browder story, and they don't understand the Prevezon case, and they don't understand what Natalia Veselnitskaya did. They don't understand what Paul Manafort did. They don't understand that this was a major, major acknowledgement that there was a conspiracy with Putin and Trump, a conspiracy between the Trump campaign to give information to the Russians in order for them to target individuals in the United States to suppress their votes. I mean, they went after African Americans in a way I can't even explain it to you. I mean, Black Lives Matter was a big, huge issue. Remember that? Black Lives Matter. And they were going, Blue Lives Matter. Black lives, all lives matter. They were trying to distract. Well, the Russians set up an incredible, based on specific polling data that Manafort delivered as payment to Oleg Deripaska through Konstantin Kalimnik. Tried to pay Oleg Deripaska and even offered him private briefings on the data so that they could then target specific areas of this country. And for the first time in 20 years, check out this little factoid. For the first time in 20 years, African American turnout in a presidential election was way down. For the first time, you had a president who was spouting the most racist crap, and the Russians were able to target and convince African Americans that they should either vote for Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein or sit it out because Hillary was just as bad. And they played the super predator thing. They started talking about Jesus. They created, Instagram. Nobody talks about the Instagram account. Instagram accounts that the Russians created, 187 million people either liked, shared, viewed the Instagram accounts. We know about the Facebook, the Facebook numbers. They were through the roof. But the Instagram accounts make the Facebook accounts look stupid. And the way that they understood what was going on in America, they go, oh, the Russians were studying, No. The Russians were given the polling data. People were being polled about what did they care about in this election. And Manafort gave that internal polling data to the Russians so that they could talk to various voters in specific areas and suppress them from, choosing Hillary. Suppress them. Either tell them Hillary was just as racist and to sit it out, or you should vote for Jill Stein, or you should vote for Bernie Sanders. I mean, this is what they did based on responses that people gave to pollsters in the United States, which Paul Manafort delivered to the Russians. That right there is a conspiracy. It is a conspiracy to defraud the United States based on internal data. And at the same time, they were hacking the DNC. So they had everything. They had everything. They knew the strategy. They knew the complaints that the Democrats had. They knew what Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was then the chair of the DNC, was complaining about with regard to Bernie. They knew Bernie, to play the Bernie card. They knew to play the Jill Stein card. And of course, Jill Stein was at that same RT dinner with Flynn. You know, they understood, and then Manafort handed them the keys to the kingdom from the Republicans, all the stuff the Republicans. If you have the Democrats and the Republicans' information on strategy and polling and issues that are important, then you know exactly what kind of memes to target people with and where they are. They had the whole enchilada. They had it all. They had more than the media had. That's why, the media is saying there's no chance. There's no chance. The Russians knew exactly who they targeted, and they knew whether or not people were liking those things that they were putting out. They knew which memes were getting traction in the African-American community, especially the African-American community. And for the first time, again, in 20 years, African-American turnout in a presidential election was down. It was down. And they were successful. And that's pretty much what happened here. So that's what Mueller has. And this is why Trump is talking about a wall.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Breaking news. CNN has learned that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who launched and has overseen Robert Mueller's Russia investigation for more than a year now, will leave the Justice Department in the coming weeks after a new Attorney General is confirmed. Joining us now to talk about this and so much more is former Democratic vice presidential candidate and Senator Tim Kaine. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, Allison, good to be with you.
Rod Rosenstein has shepherded the Mueller investigation. What is your feeling as you wake up to this news that he'll soon be departing?
Well, that news causes me great concern, Allison. You're right. Shepherded, I would say he's allowed and protected the investigation to go forward, which it needs to. His announcement that he plans to step down once the AG is confirmed is going to really raise the stakes for the hearing in the Judiciary Committee on the nomination of William Barr to be AG. Because as you've also reported, William Barr was sending freelance memos to the Trump administration, making a case to undercut the Mueller investigation. So the deep concern will be, if he comes in and Rosenstein is gone, is this just a preface to either undercutting the investigation or trying to keep the results of it hidden from the American public?
Let's talk.
Yeah, and that's the part that is interesting. Okay, so Rosenstein announced today that he is going to be leaving. He is the Deputy Attorney General, and he's in charge of Mueller. He supervises Mueller because Jeff Sessions, who was our Attorney General, another racist, recused himself because he's got dirty hands when it comes to Russia. Okay, he had meetings that he did not disclose, private meetings, with Kislyak, Ambassador Kislyak, in his Senate office that he did not disclose. And, of course, he was on the campaign, and he was running the foreign policy shop that hired George Papadopoulos and Carter Page and all these, miscreants. Okay, so he had to recuse himself, and therefore the acting the deputy had to make the call about whether or not there was enough there to appoint an independent counsel. Or a special counsel. We don't have an independent anymore. An independent would be picked by Congress, okay? That's the difference. So he looked at it after the Comey firing, and he said there's enough here to require an investigation of collusion, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. So Rod Rosenstein is the person who selected Bob Mueller, which everybody, regardless of party at the time, said was a great choice. He was a Marine, and he was the FBI director to a Republican president and kept held over for the Obama administration. That's how good he is, and that's how not political he is, and he never leaks, and he's just an upright, upstanding American guy. Everybody loved him, okay? Now, all of a sudden, the Russians are helping to denigrate Robert Mueller. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the stuff that the Russians did during the campaign, it's still going on. And they're the ones that, they pretend to be Americans, and they're on Facebook, and they're on Instagram, and they're on Twitter, the bots, and the people with these 3 followers, 6, whatever they are, right? And they're the ones that are saying Mueller is compromised, and Mueller once defended Islam. All this stuff that they now know is hot button stuff for the white supremacists in the United States. Anyway, so they're still doing it, trying to denigrate Mueller. Well, if Rosenstein leaves, right now we have an acting attorney general because everybody's out. No, we have no government. We have no one. We don't have a secretary of defense. We don't have a chief of staff at the Pentagon. All forced out. All forced out. No one can be recruited to work for this president except this Bill Barr dude. Okay? His confirmation hearings start next week. I think it'll last 2 days, the 15th and the 16th. And that's all anybody's going to be talking about. You watch, you wait. And it's important because Bob Barr has previously been in that office. And now, since he's, retiring and getting older, I guess he figures he made all his money and he can, help the president do something with the Mueller investigation. The fact that Rosenstein said today that if Barr is confirmed and once he's placed into the office of Attorney General, he will leave, which means if Bob Barr, if his hearings are next week, okay, that takes it to the middle of January, and then it'll take, a couple weeks to get a vote, and then let's say he's confirmed, and then a transition occurs, figure February, beginning, middle February, is when this man would become the Attorney General of the United States, and Rosenstein will leave. Because Rod Rosenstein knows exactly what Mueller has to sign off on subpoenas, has to sign off on document production, has to sign off on Mueller opening up an inquiry over here, or Mueller opening up an inquiry over there, or, doing some sort of a plea deal over here. Rosenstein supervises Bob Mueller. The fact that Rosenstein is saying that he could now leave tells me he knows that Mueller is pretty much done. Now, last week, Mueller asked for a 6-month extension for the grand jury. Doesn't mean that it will last another 6 months, just means that the grand jury authorization had expired and he wasn't done yet, which means more indictments like Roger Stone, Jerome Corsi, for instance. These are people that have said that they expect to be indicted. So maybe Mueller needs, a couple more weeks or so, maybe even a month, not necessarily the whole 6 months. And the grand jury had to be renewed. So that happened. But I think the biggest problem we might have is not that Bob Barr will be in a position to fire Mueller because this thing is so far and, it's so developed that it wouldn't pass muster. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think even Lindsey Graham would have a cow. Everyone on the Senate Intelligence Committee, including, what's his name, from North Carolina, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, what's his name? Burr. Senator Burr, he's a Republican from North Carolina. He knows there's there. I think he would have a cow. If, this guy comes in, gets confirmed, they're going to ask him, you watch, they're going to ask him whether or not he would recuse himself from all things Russia. He probably has to give them assurances that he will in order to get the votes for confirmation. And then he comes in and he fires Mueller. I just don't see that is the way. What I think he'll agree to is to recuse himself from the Mueller investigation, which means what we really have to pay attention to is not just the confirmation hearings for our next Attorney General, which is a very important position in charge of the entire justice system, but who the Deputy Attorney General is. Because the deputy would then be the new Rosenstein. The deputy would be the person in charge of making sure that Mueller can continue his work, number one, until he feels he's concluded, Mueller does. And two, we now have to worry about the release of the Mueller report, no matter what it finds, because Mueller was not appointed by Congress. He was appointed by the acting attorney general or the deputy attorney general, Rod Rosenstein. That means Mueller's report goes to that person. Mueller's report would go to the attorney general if he doesn't recuse himself from the Russia investigation, or the deputy if Bob Barr has to give assurances to Congress to get confirmed. And that's why we have to pay special attention to who the deputy attorney general is going to be. So that's the first issue. So you could be smarter than anybody else, okay? The second issue is no matter who is in charge, whether or not, it's Barr or a deputy, they're going to get the report. Whether or not they release the report to Congress, whether or not they make the report public is their decision, whoever that person is, whether it's the AG or the deputy. And that is why I think Mueller has no choice at this point but to indict the president. Why do I keep saying that? Because the indictment would be released to the court, it would be a public document, and we would get to see it. And there would be no question about Bob Barr wanting to release it or the deputy wanting to give it to Congress. No, it would be there. And we would see it, just like we saw the indictment of Veselnitskaya, because that was, SDNY, but it's still federal, and it went to the court, and we saw the indictment. Same thing with, Papadopoulos and Mueller. Same thing with the 23 Russians that he indicted. I mean, that was the most informative indictment of all of them so far, only because it showed what the Russians did. And now that you know how they knew who to target, a la the Manafort story yesterday, it's all becoming a clear picture. And that clear picture is a conspiracy between a Trump campaign, Trump's son, Trump's son-in-law, Flynn, Kushner, Manafort. And remember, we haven't heard from Rick Gates. He's cooperating. We haven't heard from him. We know that there was a second meeting with Russians that, what was his name? George Nadler, I think his name was, the Lebanese businessman, and then the Seychelles meeting also with Eric Prince. There are a lot of loose ends out there. So there are more indictments as long as we keep getting these speaking indictments, as they refer to them, because Mueller's team writes beautiful, plain English that I can understand. And if you spend a few minutes with these speaking indictments and you lay them all out in front of each other, you start to see the conspiracy. You start to see what the motivation was for a guy like Manafort, what the motivation was and is for a guy like Carter Page, what the motivation is for a guy like Papadopoulos, what the motivation for a Michael Flynn might have been. We don't know what Rick Gates knows, but he was Manafort's business partner for many years. Manafort, Gates, they were together. We know Manafort had a lobby shop with Roger Stone for years and years. So all these people are connected, and these indictments connect them to Russian activities. So that report's going to be everything. And unless we can trust the new attorney general or the deputy attorney general to make it public, Mueller's going to have to write a speaking indictment of Trump.
He's live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
We just learned yesterday, because of inadvertently unredacted court filing, that Paul Manafort, then the president's campaign chair, delivered Trump campaign polling to someone connected to Russian intelligence. Were you aware of that? And does that contact between a Trump campaign official and Russian intelligence, does that constitute a form of collusion?
No, it doesn't. And we're going to get to the rest of the information on it. More of that will come out. Obviously, that was redacted previously, and then that it was actually put out yesterday. This is an ongoing relationship that Paul Manafort had with Ukraine. He was a representative of Ukraine, worked for the Ukrainian government, and was trying to be able to work for a peace proposal, which, by the way, I did not support what he was doing and don't think what he was doing was appropriate. But he had Ukrainian clients. This was a Ukrainian client. Now, this person also previously worked for the Russian military, but so did most everybody in that. So I don't see this as a deliberate contact with the Russian government.
What?
This was a person that he'd worked with for a decade and a half at that point in Ukraine. And so we need to get the whole story on it because it makes it sound like this is some secret back channel communication with it. If it was, this was someone that Paul Manafort had known for a very long time and trusted.
But according to prosecutors, had connections to Russian intelligence.
Well, I think he knew he had connections to the Russian government, but communicating with someone about polling data and what's going is no secret thing in that sense. So I'm, again, looking for that as the smoking gun, I think would be a pretty big stretch.
That's James Lankford, a Republican senator who was on the Senate Intelligence Committee and knows what happened. And he's making excuses for Paul Manafort handing over to Konstantin Kilimnik internal polling data to a Russian intelligence. Well, they're all Russian intelligence over there. I mean, everybody in Russia is a former Russian intelligence. Let me explain to you. This is what you would call a 5-alarm fire if you were looking for a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian intelligence operatives.
Paul Manafort handed over polling data. Paul Manafort was the campaign chair for the Trump campaign. Handed over internal polling data to someone known to be connected to Russian intelligence. Dana, you're going, covered a lot of campaigns.
Yeah.
If you hear the campaign chair sharing internal data with someone connected to the intelligence services of another country, that's unusual.
Yes. I mean, that's an understatement. I heard Senator Lankford on with you last hour, diminishing it. He's a member of the Intelligence Committee. That actually surprised me because he's on these issues and a lot of issues. He's not a partisan player when it comes to particularly national security. And this is a 5-alarm fire when it comes to national security and counterintelligence. For the campaign chair, whether he had power or not, that was his title. Of a major party candidate to meet with somebody who is a known operative, high-ranking operative in Russian intelligence, let's just say that they just met and did nothing but had coffee, as far as we know, that would be a big deal. But then to hand over internal polling data, there's so many questions that raises. None of the answers is good.
And I have to tell you, I mean, it's so amazing because there are emails between Manafort and Oleg Deripaska, going to Konstantin Kilimnik to deliver a message to Oleg Deripaska, who's suing him for money for a media campaign that he doesn't produce or hadn't produced to date. And he's saying, listen, I'm doing it. Has he seen the newspapers? Has he seen the reporting? Is he watching this campaign? Ask him, what do I have to do to make myself whole with him? Tell him I will give him private briefings. This is insanity. This is crazy pants time. This is off the hook. Now, again, remember, there's a mystery company that's still, being held in contempt of court. There's a mystery company in a mystery country that everybody believes is a bank that has been subpoenaed for records by Mueller. And when the court ruled that this company is not protected because they have a branch apparently here in the United States, which is where the subpoena was served, and they have a commercial interest in the United States. They do commercial business in the United States, which then takes the shield off of them. That exposed them to document production requests. Well, yesterday, the court ruled, remember they appealed and they wanted an en-banc decision. The court ruled that they are in contempt. They do have to produce these bank documents. Well, we don't know if it's a bank, but I'm assuming it's a bank. They do have to produce documents, and they are being fined $50,000 a day, every day, that they do not turnover records. So we don't know who this company is still, although some reporters are saying it is a bank. They know that much. This portion of it has to do with money laundering and payments. Jim Langford, while he, according to Dana Bash, who covers Congress very well, says he's usually not partisan when it comes to issues of national security, I think is compromised. I must tell you that I think a good chunk of the Republican senators, the Republican Party, is compromised. How? Well, you know, the NRA brought a lot of these legislators over to Russia through these throwdown parties with lots of vodka that they said was off the hook crazy. There obviously there's tapes, there's obviously behavior, there's obviously drunk behavior, and there's obviously money. Money that was laundered through the NRA into various Republican senators, Congress members, and the Trump campaign. I have a funny feeling that they all know that they took this money. I think they all know that the NRA is compromised by big Russian money, like $30 million worth. And either they don't want to give it back or they don't want to admit that they knew. And if they gave it back, they would have to admit that they knew. And when they talk about, Mitch McConnell's afraid of being primaried, remember who primaries you. It's people and donors with lots and lots of money, like the NRA. They would run the ads to primary you. They would pick the next candidate, right? They would be the ones. If Mitch McConnell is really scared of being primaried, that would surprise me, that this is the reason why he's literally not passing bills to open the government that he was for 11 days ago. Bills that his Senate voted for 11 days ago. Funding for the government 11 days ago. Now all of a sudden he's holding all that hostage because it gives the president a chance to talk about the wall and build up the base again. And he's got dirty hands. And his wife is a cabinet member, and maybe she knows a couple of things that she shouldn't know. It's a very sick situation. This president is dangerous.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, I want to get back to what Dana was saying about Senator Langford. He said this is not the smoking gun of collusion. You're the expert in smoking gun investigations. How do you see this?
You know, I actually wrote down that phrase when I was listening to his interview because it made my eyes widen.
Really?
In investigations, there is rarely a smoking gun. You have different clues that you try to assemble in order to paint a picture, to describe what happened, to tell a story. Rarely do you have Richard Nixon on the tape, you know, trying to obstruct an investigation. It's more nuanced than that. And so I think the senator knows that. I'm also confused as to why he's trying to diminish this. But the American people have to understand this is a major deal to have a president's campaign manager colluding, and I'll say that word. I don't know if it's illegal what he did. That's yet to be seen, but at least colluding with a person that he knows is tied to a foreign intelligence service is just incredible.
See, and what you're left with here, when you hear former FBI agents like, Josh over there, when you hear them say, that made my eyes wide, and this is not the, we're following clues and everything. Yes, those clues are going to be banking records and documents and emails and phone records and blocked phone numbers and phone calls to blocked phone numbers, right? Which Mueller all had. And that is what's building the picture. But when he says, well, we don't know why James Langford is saying stuff like that, it lets people who like me, who really pay attention, and you, because we are the front line here. We're the people who choose to be informed. We're the people that are going to be called on first, to explain it to others who might be on the fence to save this country. There's no question. That's what we do. That's what we're doing. So people like us are left to wonder why James Langford says this isn't a big deal. And the only answer is because he's part of this deal. However small, could be just the NRA money, could be a trip to Russia he took. God only knows. All right, Michael in California.
Hi, Randy.
Hey, Michael.
There's a lot of stuff you've covered today, but one thing, Jill Stein, when Flynn was in Moscow having dinner with Putin, who was sitting right there? Jill Stein.
Right.
And she made a difference in a lot of key states as to how this election turned out.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one thing I wish more people would pay attention to.
Well, she didn't. I mean, are you saying that she did something wrong by running as a Green Party candidate?
Well, I'm just, because she was there in Moscow, I'm concerned about her motives in running and her backing, backing from Russia.
Oh, like who gave her money?
Yeah, all that kind of
it would be interesting to see. I don't know that she had that much money, but that, look, the idea that Russia was looking at Flynn for Trump and Jill Stein to peel off votes from Hillary Clinton, that's what that photo shows. That was a strategy that Putin was engaged in.
Okay. One of the things that worries me most about what's going on now with Trump is the corner he's boxing himself into. And it's becoming more dangerous as we go along.
If he could box the United States in as tightly as he boxed himself in, we wouldn't need a stinking wall, that's for sure.
Well, it's hard to imagine an end game on this at this point. It really is.
Right. I mean, the end game is going to be, the Mueller report, and that's going to put a period at the end of the sentence of this, presidency, one way or another. One way or another. And either Donald Trump, it's bizarre to think that 87 contacts between his campaign and Russians is going to produce no collusion, no conspiracy, no fraud. That to me is just impossible to believe. But if that would happen, then Trump would be the president in 2020. That's the answer.
During last night's speech, he used the word migration instead of immigration.
Uh-huh.
Did you catch that?
Yeah.
There's a big difference. In as much as migration is more of a periodic thing, birds migrate, things migrate. It's not the same as immigration, where people go.
It is if you go to a Latin country, they don't call it immigration; they call it migration.
Well, yeah. Well, you use the term faux news. Did you get that from Facebook?
No, why?
Oh, I posted a thing on there where I changed the Fox News logo to faux news.
Oh, I've been saying that for what, 20 years?
We're on the same page.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And it's really a vowel movement away from what it does to the news. Faux is too kind. Faux is too French. It's too fabulous. It's too Paris. It's too Parisian. Now what they do is if you change the O to a U, that's what they do to the news. That's what I mean when I say a vowel movement away from what they do to the news. These people are in the tank with him so deeply, and I mean it's a sick propaganda machine, which is why we have to solve that problem too. And I've told you what my solution is, and I've had this solution probably since 1996. That's how long I've been thinking about the media. That's how long it has been disturbing to me to watch what corporate has done to the media. Because in 1996, Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Deregulation Act. And that allowed all the mom and pops that would program for their local communities and carry a couple of national shows to be bought out by the Dark Star. It was Clear Channel at the time, but it was the Dark Star, and they offered mom and pops so much money that they just couldn't say no. And they started to program thousands of hours of conservative talk. This was the first efforts in propagandizing the United States, and it worked to a certain extent. We ended up with, a contract on America, and after 40 years of economic expansion and a Democratic Congress, all of a sudden we get flipped over to this Republican racket. And things have never been right. They've never been right. Since then, all the tax breaks go to the top, and the middle class has been hacked away at, and unions have been busted, and healthcare has become more expensive. Pharmaceuticals have gone through the roof. I mean, they did all of this to this country long time ago.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
I see him as what happens when corruption invades a system.
Right.
That it gets a little bit corrupt, and it gets a little more corrupt, and it gets a little more corrupt, and then it gets bigger, and they get bolder and bolder. And then you end up with someone like Donald Trump. Somebody who just isn't even coy about it.
Okay.
Someone whose cabinet appointees don't know sic 'em from come here about whatever is the subject area they're supposed to be in charge of. Cabinet officials that get caught for trading in stocks in the areas that they are supposed to oversee. Cabinet officials that don't even pay their taxes, and no shame, just keep it up, because now they're wallowing in the corruption.
Yeah, and that is what started in 1996. There is no question. I mean, you look at the purchasing of all the airwaves by giant like one corporation who was the gatekeeper for all the information that was just bleeding out into the American populace. Right? It was voices like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity and all these these sick racketeers, right, that were enriching themselves and, corrupting the entire dialogue about, what a small d democracy is and how government works, and that the president is not a unitary executive, and we don't torture people, we don't invade unarmed nations, and we don't shut down the government. By 1998-99, you had Bill Clinton being impeached for having an affair during a government shutdown. Right? And it just went off the rails. I mean, impeachment became like a game. It became a joke. It didn't become something reserved for the worst of the worst. It became something that Newt Gingrich could, use to try and defeat a political party. And it just got more corrupt from there. It just got more and more corrupt. Then we started invading unarmed nations. Then we started allowing for lying about awesome terrorist attacks. We started allowing for the Osama bin Laden, attack, right? That attack on 9/11. 15 of those 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. And what did we do? George Bush flew out members of the bin Laden family overnight to protect them. And America stayed put because you had so much conservative media like the Jim Langfords. Oh, it's not a thing. This isn't a smoking gun. We had torture. We had 7 low-ranking reservists pay the price for the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, ordering people to be put on dog leashes and stripped naked and have electrodes attached to their genitals while they stood on, boxes. And photographs of it, and the photographic evidence, and the testimony of a general who was in charge of all the prisons at Abu Ghraib, said that she was locked out of Abu Ghraib so that the contractors could go in, and the contractors would present themselves to the low-ranking reservists that were called up and sent over there as CIA operatives, or inside CIA guys, or inside FBI guys, counterintelligence dudes, and they were being ordered to do these things by these contractors. But unbeknownst to them, these guys were civilians. They thought that they were CIA. They thought that they were counterintelligence operatives, and it turned out they weren't. And that these poor low-ranking reservists followed those orders, and they're the ones that went to Leavenworth. That kind of corruption. George Bush saying he was a unitary executive. He could warrantlessly wiretap Americans. I mean, people like me were outraged. This is when James Comey first became somebody known to me, because the night that George Bush tried to get the warrantless wiretapping program through. James Comey's Ashcroft, the Attorney General at the time, his wife called James Comey, who was acting Attorney General, because Ashcroft was under the influence of, Demerol, for God's sake. He had a gallbladder operation, and he was receiving, intense pain management. I don't know if it was, morphine or Demerol or whatever. And they were asking him to sign off on the warrantless wiretapping in that state. And so his wife had called James Comey and said, please go to the hospital. Guess who was with James Comey? Bob Mueller. And Bob Mueller told James Comey not to leave that room, to stay there. And don't let Ashcroft sign off on something that is obviously unconstitutional, violated everybody's right to privacy. Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, all kinds of, constitutional violations. And nobody, people didn't take to the streets then. All this. And it's all led to this president. It has all led to a president who literally thinks he is above the law, who says things like, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, and believes it. Why? Because the conservative movement in this country has corrupted everything that we think represents constitutional democracy and has gotten away with it. 17 years we're in Afghanistan. Been in Iraq since 2003, 15 years. Everything based on a lie. All these things have happened. Trillions of dollars have left our coffers. Billions of dollars just, go missing. Then you get a serious president. And what do? They say he's illegitimate. And the mass media is so organized around this. And we end up with the chief birther as the president. And we're left to debate whether or not he's a racist. Please, never mind all of that. He is corrupt. He is the final product of corruption, the ultimate test of our Constitution, the ultimate test of small d democracy. That is what we're facing. Charlotte in California.
Hi, Randy.
Hi.
I just wanted to, the internal polling data, that's sticking in my head, but what's sticking in my head along with it is the Russians stole the voter registration rolls. Now, if you think about it, essentially, between the two, they've got pinpoint accurate information of, where they need to concentrate their efforts, target, all their efforts, it's literally given to them. They've got where they vote, who votes, when the last time they voted. This is just ripe for an absentee ballot fraud.
Which is what happened.
That's absolutely what happened.
Yeah.
If you look at Mark Harris in North Carolina.
Right, exactly.
He gave us, here, look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is exactly how it was done, only he got his butt busted.
And do you think it's a coincidence that African Americans were the target?
Right. Just to think it's a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. The fact is they knew who, what, when, where, why, and how. And they knew it accurately. Pinpointed to the household.
Yes, they did.
It's insane. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any stretch of the word. But
well, you don't have to theorize, because now we have a document that actually says that Manafort did provide that information to the Russian intelligence, to the GRU.
And we also have information saying that the Russians did steal the voter registration rolls. Now, with these voter registration rolls, they know, like, say, for instance, when the last time you voted. So people who don't vote very often and haven't voted in the last, say, 3 cycles, hell, they can turn in absentee ballots saying whatever they want for these people, and chances are no stink is going to be brought up.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we're
they
under.
Didn't need many votes.
Listen, last night the president was sitting there trying to sell the American people that America has a crisis. America has a crisis, and its name is Donald Trump. America has a crisis, and its name is the Republican Party. America has a racket, a complete and utter racket going on to destroy the middle class, to destroy the forgotten man, okay, to destroy us, literally destroy us, to destroy our alliances, to destroy our population, to destroy people's livelihoods, to destroy everything about America that makes America, a big challenger in the world to authoritarians. They are dismantling us piece by piece.
But it makes no sense. I mean, the rich, what are they going to do if there's no one else to buy their product?
Oh, they'll go to China. Remember, as far as consumerism goes, America is an also-ran because China's got 1 billion people. India has 1 billion people. Those are the new middle class. Those are the new consumers. Okay,
right, and it's more global as opposed to
it's not. It's not so much that it's global. It's that America has had its day, according to the oligarchs of the world, and its day is done. And the only thing that represents a threat to them is our awesome military power. And so why not destroy our alliances? Why not destroy, our welcome mat in, our various bases around the world? Why not do that? Why not peel off Turkey as a NATO ally? Why not, say that Germany is not paying their fair share and we won't defend them. You know what I mean? So that they kick us out.
Randy, it still blows my mind. I mean, I grew up and I was so proud to be an American. I mean, I couldn't even imagine standing in Paul Manafort's shoes and doing this. I mean, I couldn't imagine turning on my country like this. How are we breeding these people?
Well, I mean, it's obvious that the lobbying laws and these lobby shops. I mean, I know what goes on there, and the ability for American lawyers to have a Natalia Veselnitskaya under their name, practice law in New York, and file false reports or false declarations with an American federal court. To fire the prosecutor, Preet Bharara, off of a very important case like that Trump did that so that they would settle it and end that case, to end the banking, to end the discovery into the banking records. This is corruption. This is not what ordinary Americans, don't want to think that America's gone so far down this path, but we have.
We have.
Yes, we have.
Well, all we can do is keep fighting it. That's the only thing we can do.
Well, listen, this is the thing. This is the beauty of it, and this is what I was talking to Scotty about yesterday, and this is the thing that makes me still come to work every day and not, use my passport before passports are suspended, right? Is that I still believe the Constitution will win. I still believe that the people are coming and the people will win. I still believe that.
I do too. I believe in it.
I think that, this man is taking away the pride of all these working people. And once their pride is decimated, he thinks that they will cower in a corner, and I think that they will rise.
I think the shutdown, I think it's hurting Republicans more than they even realize.
I hope so.
I do too.
I hope so,
right,
because thank you. When you start attacking the American way of life, meaning you live on $50,000 a year and you got 2 kids or 3 kids or whatever, you work for the government, you're a TSA agent. We know that people that want to get into this country come in through the airports and they can't afford to get to work. When security like that is threatened, when the personal security of paying your bills, when the personal pride of going home to your son and saying, let's go, I can't say Toys R Us because they went bankrupt too, but let's go to the toy store, or Saturday is the day we go, to the batting cage, and you can afford to take your kid. When that goes away and we end up being like Russia, where they do live on $450 a month. Most Russians don't have inside toilets. That's how broke that. They live in these Stalin apartment complexes, 4 or 5 families in one freaking apartment with a bathroom down the hallway. That's what Russia is. They cannot beat us from outside. So they're trying to destroy us from the inside, which is the only way America will ever be destroyed. The only way. The only way. Mary in California.
Hi, I have a slightly different theory than why the Republicans are complicit to your NRA money. And so back in December, the shutdown was looming. The House and the Senate, they came to a deal. On the 19th, the Senate passed the continuing resolution,
right,
and the House was going to take it up on the morning of the 20th, or on the 20th, and then they were all going to get out of town for the holidays.
Right.
Well, Vesselnitskaya was actually indicted under seal on December 20th. And I think Trump has a mole in the Department of Justice, told him, he threw a fit and was like, if I don't get my wall, I won't keep my base. If I don't keep my base, then I can't threaten these Republicans in the Senate, and they might vote to have me thrown out after the House votes to impeach me. And the Republicans are complicit because if Trump doesn't have his base, then, they don't have their base. Or like he can't use that against them. Like, I'll tell my base to primary you, or I'll tell my base not to vote for you, kind of a thing. So now, like Lindsey Graham's all, we need the wall or we're done. That's it.
He has said that. He said that today, too. He said it last week. He said it today. He said the presidency of Trump is over if we don't get this wall. Why? Because they'll lose the base. They'll lose Al-Qaeda.
Yep.
Right. And, yeah, I mean, I didn't know that the date of the indictment. I have the indictment right here, but I don't see the date on it. But
I'm looking at the one, it was on the Assets Document Cloud. It was in an article, and it has this USDC SDNY date stamp, date filed December 20th, 2018.
Very, very good. Very observant. I love that about you.
Thanks, Randy. I love you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Mary in California. Very smart. Never talked to you before, but I want to talk to you again. Yeah. This is it, okay? We're up against it. There is no question about it. The president, Friday is going to come, and people aren't going to get paid. And I don't want to get into like the Supreme Court and the Janus decision, which had to do with the Public Sector Employees Union. Yeah. But it's much more than just the public sector employees. It's the contractors. It's the people who in Ogden, Utah, who have a restaurant, and the people that work at the IRS in Ogden are not there, and these buildings are sitting empty, and so no one's coming to lunch. You see how that cascades. This is crunch time. We're here. Buy a stinking podcast.